Hello, welcome to Movie Muster, Severance Season 2, Episode 10 Finale Recap. Cold Harbor not only outdoes the Season 1 finale, but it feels like the beginning of something thrilling. Play icon preview for Severance, Christopher Walken and John Turturro in conversation with creator Dan Erickson. Q, serious, because this Innie feels like he's sitting down to complete Cold Harbor right now. I mean, leave it to Severance to inject ether right into my bloodstream with a reference to Michael Jordan's Last Dance. Sarah Bulls. If you're somehow not properly hyped after watching the finale, I highly recommend that you watch this. The Severance Season 2 finale, aptly titled Cold Harbor, is here. I'm not going to spend too much time reminiscing on our journey together so far, but it's been a heck of a road to this point. We visited the tallest waterfall on the planet, enjoyed a somewhat awkward ham dinner, welcomed Keanu Reeves to the show, and almost welcomed Barack Obama, devoured a big ol' heaping of feculence, and so much more. But I do have one small thing to say about the 75-minute-long finale. I'll please Kier by keeping my vocabulary plain here. Take my hand, and let's run into the hallways of the Severance Season 2 finale. Mark S., what did you do? As soon as Outie Mark said Helly, he was a goner. Well, now we know what the new credit sequence was trying to tell us about the two Marks. They helped each other throughout the course of the season, pushing and pulling toward the common enemy, Lumon, only for Innie Mark to break free from his Outie captor at the very end of Season 2. Cold Harbor opens with a very freaked out and sweaty Innie Mark at the Damona birthing retreat. Cobel figures out that he hasn't finished Cold Harbor, which means that Jame, or Ms. Casey, to Innie Mark, is still alive. She tells him about the testing floor, which Mark recognizes from Irving's drawings, so he already knows where it is. If we can prove that Jame is alive, says Devon, if we can prove that they fucking kidnapped her, it will end them. Well, friends, Mark's following 5 words should have tipped us off to what he'd do in the final moments of this episode. Well, what happens to us? Exactly. Welcome to baby's first existential crisis, Innie Mark. Intrusive thoughts about death are the consequences of not living a part-time life, man. Turns out, Cobel and Devon devised an ingenious, lo-fi way for the Marks to speak with each other. One records a message on a camcorder, then walks outside, and vice versa. What follows is this unbelievably tragicomic sequence of each Mark battling for their own self-interests. Erickson said something interesting about the psychological dynamics at play here. Hopefully, you're rooting for Outie Mark to convince him because you want him to find his wife. But at the same time, you understand there's always been this imbalance of power between them, and Innie Mark's whole existence is literally being used by Outie Mark. I really like that Innie Mark has the wherewithal to realize, wait a second, if I do this for you, what's gonna happen? I'm guessing you're never coming back to Lumon. The conversation seemingly begins in earnest. Outie Mark apologizes for his Innie's nightmare, but it devolves into total chaos as soon as he fucks up Helly's name. You know what I think? Innie Mark fumes. I think the second you get your wife back, you forget I ever existed. I think that I disappear along with every Innie down there. Well, he's not wrong. Kudos to Adam Scott for pulling this scene off without a damn hitch. Outie Mark's aptitude for sass and condescension, Innie Mark slowly discovering the wonders of autonomy, the man is looking at an Emmy repeat. John Pack. After the Season 2 finale, it feels like we'll need another Glasgow block to see Jame Eagan again. Harmony Cobel wants to have a chat with r/Severance Apple TV+. Well, Innie Mark, actually. But while trying to convince Innie Mark to participate in the great escape of Jame Scout, she drops a clear explanation of his work at MDR for all of you theorizing along at home. Cobel, weirdly, ends up being the only person who knows how to motivate Innie Mark, treat him as a person. Which means answers. Here they are, per Cobel, the numbers are your wife. The MDR numbers. From your console. They're a doorway into the mind of your Outie's wife, Jame Scout. The clusters of numbers are her tempers. The building blocks of her mind. Every file you've completed is a new consciousness for her. A new Innie. This may not feel exactly like news to Severance loyalists, who already guessed that Mark was sorting Jema's tempers this entire time. But this line has massive implications for the nature of MDR and Lumon in general. If Mark was building Jame Innies, then what have Dylan, Irving, and Helly been doing this whole time? It seems like Severance is telling us that MDR's true purpose is to build an Innie consciousness for every person who decides to undergo the severance procedure. But just those few lines from Cobel prompt a dozen more questions. Does each refiner only work on perfecting one Innie during their tenure, or is Jeme just special? Does every Outie have a stint on the testing floor, and Lumon somehow erases their memories of their time down there? My brain is throbbing, and so is Innie Mark's, clearly. He rage quits the interaction with Cobel, yelling, "Tell my Innie, the next thing I see better be the severed floor, or he will never see his wife again. Dylan G. I'll miss you all so much after this, that I'll throw a tin of candies." Let me echo Helly and say, God, Jame Eagan is weird. While Helly is learning the directions to the testing floor, the crusty, and apparently horny Eagan patriarch shows up to say hello. "What a funny speech you gave at the party," he says. "I was cross with you after I threw a tin of candies." We learn a couple things in this small interaction. There's a hint that Helena, as myself and many fans have suspected, is no longer a devoted servant of Lumon. I do not love my daughter. I used to see Kier in her, but he left her as she grew. And if you'll remember, Cobel's comment that she's one of James in episode 9 implied that this man was swinging his dick all around Kier, p.e. Here's confirmation, I sired others in the shadows. But he wasn't in them either. Until I saw him again. In you. Helly stops just short of stabbing this creep in the neck with a fountain pen. But damn, readers, we've learned that lines like this in Severance demand a closer look. Is this foreshadowing that Helly could someday break bad? The exalted victory of Cold Harbor. Mark S. gets his wish. After storming out of the birthing cabin, he walks right back into the severed floor. He is greeted by an absolute feast of an optics and design painting, which depicts Innie and Outie Mark's entire journey to this point, the exalted victory of Cold Harbor. I spent a good 5 minutes just scanning every inch of this painting. The level of detail is fascinating. Just look at the Renaissance depiction of suffering on Mark's face, reminding us that he'll likely die upon completion of the file. You'll find the weirdo MDR clones from Woe's Hollow, the Four Tempers, Petey, R.I.P., and a goat. How nice for the baby goat to show up for Mark's big day. Helly emerges from the elevator, wearing MDR green. She embraces Mark, then they sit down at their desks to have a little work chat that'll only rip your heart out. They catch each other up and, in what feels like a deliberate decision from the Severance team, which I'll get into later, hatch a plan off camera. Here's what we do here, besides that beautiful Delaware throwback to when Mark first met Helly in Season 1, Episode 1. If you get her out, that will take down Lumon and do this combining thing, Helly says. At least you'll have a chance at living. Mark responds, "Yeah, but I want to live with you," to which Helly says, "But I'm her, Mark. I'm her." Well, Mark's him, am I right? So he chooses to complete Cold Harbor. Okay, now I'm going to straight up embed the Bulls intro for Game 6 of the 1997 NBA Finals, just in case you ignored me earlier. There's a lot going on, I know. There's a version of this scene, where Mark completes Cold Harbor, that shows Milchick dancing alone in celebration. Or something. But this is Severance. Which means that the giant, wax Kier figurine praises Mark, enjoys a stand-up bit with Mr. Milchick, and a marching band from a brand new department. Hello, choreography and merriment. Storms the floor. Again, because this is Severance, the cinematography is so damn good that the crew affixed cameras to the drums. I bet it was Jessica Lee Gagne. This is the now iconic music dance experience scene on steroids. That we should just enjoy this party for what it is, a feast for Severance diehards. But I do have one note about the Kier figurine. Listen to him speak again. Hear something? How about the familiar crackle of the Lumon board in Natalie's ear? Someone is voicing the statue. Now is probably a good time to tell you that a real actor is behind Kier Eagan, Mark Geller. Same likeness and everything. I feel like it's definitely not a coincidence. Especially when Kier refers to Milchick as his earthbound steward, which implies that, Kier is not earthbound. Yeah, the old man could be yucking it up in the afterlife, but I don't think so, even after the season 2 finale. I feel as if Severance's endgame has yet to make itself clear.